Have you ever wondered why people act morally or do good things? Is it for the sake of being moral, or is it for something else? Gyges of Lydia was a shepherd to the ruler of Lydia. One day, an earthquake struck the land where he was tending the sheep, and the ground split in half, which created an opening that could be entered. He went down to see what was in it. When he went down, he saw a hollow bronze horse which had window like openings. Curious to see what was in there, he took a peep through the window like opening and saw a giant corpse, which had a ring on his finger. Gyges ended up taking the ring. On a monthly meeting with the other shepherds, he wore the ring, and when he turned the ring inwards, he suddenly became invisible. When he turned the ring outward, he would become visible once again. He experimented and tried it a few more times to test whether the ring really had this power, and it did. He then got into the king's palace by being one of his messengers. On arriving at the palace, Gyges seduced the king's wife and with her help attacked and murdered the king. In the end, Gyges took over the kingdom. Now, you might be asking yourself, why should I care about this story? In Plato's Republic, a book that attempts to find ways on how society ought to be structured so human beings can flourish, Glaucon asks the question, why do humans act justly? In other words, why do people act in a good way? Justice is thought to be good, and there are three types of goods. The first type of good is good for its own sake. These are things like happiness, which are pursued for its own sake and not for anything else. The second type of good is for its own sake and for the sake of something else. For example, we may desire to learn merely for the sake of learning, or we might do so to get a good grade on the exam. The third type of good is merely for the sake of its consequences. This includes physical training, medical treatment, and of course, money. Glaucon thinks that justice belongs to the third type of good, for the sake of its consequences. But what even is this thing called justice? Glaucon defines justice as what the law commands. He also defines justice as what is between the best and the worst. The best is doing injustice without paying the penalty, and the worst is suffering injustice without being able to take revenge. Simply put, it is the mean between suffering and committing injustice. Glaucon thinks that people love justice not because it is a good thing, but because they are unable to commit injustice without being punished for it. He says, people love justice not because it is a good thing, but because they are too weak to do injustice with impunity. Someone who has the power to do it, however, someone who is truly a man, would not make an agreement with anyone, neither to do injustice nor to suffer it. For him, that would be insanity. But what if people had the power to commit injustice without getting punished for it? What if I can break a vase and get away with it, while my sibling gets blamed and punished for it? How great would that be? Remember that one time where you broke Dad's expensive watch, and I got locked up in the bathroom for 2 whole weeks? Now it's time for revenge. Glaucon says that given the opportunity to avoid punishment, the just person would then turn into an unjust person. This is demonstrated by the story of the Ring of Gyges, or the allegory of the ring. Glaucon also thinks that people commit injustice because of the desire to do better. To do better means to want to have more and more, leading one to take what belongs to others rather than what is one's own. People act justly not willingly, but because they are compelled to do so, perhaps by law or force. When people are watching, or when we think that people are watching, we tend to do the right thing. But when people are not watching, or when we think that no one is watching, we tend to do what benefits us, while appearing to be moral. This is supported by a study published by contemporary social psychologist Daniel Batson. Batson's study attempted to answer 3 questions. Number 1, how people behave when they think that they are not being observed. Number 2, how do people interpret their actions as morally good or bad? And number 3, what factors may lead them to behave in more moral and honest ways? Participants were presented with the opportunity to assign themselves and another participant to one of 2 tasks. The first task is to answer some questions, which, if answered correctly, gives the participant a chance to win money from lottery tickets. The second task is a task which is considered to be dull and boring, and getting a correct answer will not get the participant anything. On some trials, a coin would be present, and participants could decide whether to flip it or not. The coin acts as a moral standard, meaning that if I flip the coin, I would be acting fairly. To answer the first question, Batson found that about 80% of the participants would interpret the coin flip as assigning themselves to the positive task. This means that many people may not behave in honest ways when they are not around other people. To answer the second question, Batson found that many participants interpreted their actions as highly moral if they flipped the coin, even if they did not obey the outcome. Glaucon did not only think that people acted justly for the sake of appearing to be just, but that the unjust person would be happier than the just person. He presents a scenario with two hypothetical persons, one that is unjust and the other just. The unjust person would appear to be just his entire life and enjoy all the benefits, such as honor and good reputation, of being just, while the truly just person would spend all his life being seen as an unjust person and suffer all the consequences of being unjust. Glaucon then asks, would anyone still want to be just if they were in that situation, or would they rather be unjust while appearing to be just? Therefore, he says, that the unjust person has good reasons to appear to be just and that he is right for doing so. If Glaucon is right, then shouldn't we all just be hypocrites? But wouldn't that make the world a scary place to live in? Is there anything that will make people behave in more moral and honest ways? Batson says yes. In another study, he added a mirror in the room and told participants that the mirror was being used by someone else for another study. Participants were informed not to touch or move the mirrors. In an attempt to answer the third question, Batson discovered that when participants flip the coin while facing the mirror, they act more honestly. This suggests that being watched, either by oneself or others, will encourage one to act in more moral ways. While Batson's study suggests that people might only care about appearing moral instead of being moral, the question of why people desire to appear moral rather than being moral still remains unanswered. Perhaps it is for social benefits, or perhaps that is just what society expects of us. If you had the ring of Gyges, what would you do, and why?